So why do you do what you do, man? Your banner on YouTube is here to serve. So why do you serve? How do you serve? Where did this all come from? And yeah, just take us through kind of your journey so far, and then we can get the ball rolling.
Well, it's a pretty powerful, I guess, question because why is anyone doing what they do? And I feel like that's almost a fundamental question to exploring life. I think at the core level, we're all looking for meaning. We're all looking to make meaning. Why did this happen to me? Why did this person do this to me? And then our brain searches for meaning to apply to situations that we have in any aspect of our life. So, asking me why am I doing what I'm doing? My perspective is that I'm almost just doing the easiest answer, but maybe the least satisfactory is that I'm just doing what feels right to me. I'm
Hmm.
just exploring things that I find interesting and just sharing that with the internet. I didn't know people were going to be so fascinated by it. I had no idea people were going to find it so interesting. But to me, it seems like there's a almost a missing piece of our understanding of reality, whether it's with our history, which I've been recently watching Ancient Apocalypse, which is explores that.
Great show.
Great show. But and I mean it's a great show to examine this idea of us forgetting, us not realizing that we know so much more than we know. And so I started finding these things along the way, which is typically in consciousness, spirituality, more Eastern perspective almost of the world. And I started finding so many truths in it. And it wasn't only that I was finding the truths that seemed to be so much more laid out in the Eastern world, but we have so many elements of them in the Western world as well. And yet, somewhere along the way, we started deciding that science was more important than the spirit. And don't get me wrong, I believe science is a very important piece of our evolution. Evolution's a weird word nowadays, but a piece of our progress, a piece of us evolving into the next thing that we're going to become. Because in my history, for those who don't know, I went to college for computer engineering. I was a software engineer for 4 years. I then basically uprooted my life in San Diego, which had the most beautiful women in the world. I had two beaches within a 30-second walk of my house. I was a software engineer, so it's not like, money was an issue. And I decided to uproot all of that just to travel and essentially start my podcast. And it was really me diving into this world of exploration, this world of the unknown, this world of being told that it's not as big as you think it is. Like people saying that, you're overanalyzing, you're looking too deep on this thing, you're looking too deep on that thing. And it's weird because to me, I don't see it as looking too deep. It's almost like just seeing all the bits and pieces and this puzzle, this mosaic starting to form in front of me. Like it's almost like some of the information's over here, some of it's down here, some of it's in the right corner, the left corner. And as you compile all these different pieces of the mosaic, it starts to turn into this beautiful landscape of like, oh, I see how science relates to spirituality. I see how stargates have this different multidimensional thing that then relates to aliens, that then is why the government is, bombing this country, or
Yeah.
and it you start to see all the pieces in another way where you can take a step back and be like, oh, I see how all of these things are connected. And I suppose at some level I want to do my best to show people that mosaic as well. And so I guess it brings in the creator role where it's like, trying to open up these different things. And some people block themselves from seeing parts of the picture, whether they don't want to, whether they don't want to believe in it, or whatever excuse they have. I mean, maybe it's not an excuse, but just like a way of thinking, a way of blocking yourself from realities that you don't want to see. And that can take us on a whole rabbit hole with psilocybin therapy that I've had in my past. But just, I guess, here to serve. I'm here to give the perspective, provide I don't like the word alternative, provide a perspective that is a little bit more encompassing of everything that we have, because people get so niched into this one line of thinking that I want to at least show where there's a connection between all of these different things to create this mosaic that hopefully people can sit back and be like, okay, I understand why all this is happening the way it is.
I see. Mm-hmm. Well said. Yeah, it's all connected one way or the other. Spirituality and science, there really is there's a blend. If you know how to look at it, there is definitely a blend. And like you said, aliens and a country invading one country, or the politics of humanity. And then what I'm trying to say is, yeah, the mosaic of this mystery of life it is mosaic. It's almost like mandala like, and how all the dots connect. And if you know how to look at it in the right way, know how to look at yourself in the picture, it does paint this picture of some kind of semblance of almost order. Like there is, you can kind of feel that everything is interrelated in this mystery that we call life. But yeah,
The
man,
best
it's go ahead.
to cut you off real quick, the
Go
best
ahead.
example I've thought of, there's two of them. The first one is kind of like a kaleidoscope, how, you can always shift your perspective. You can spin the kaleidoscope and you're
Mm,
going to see something different. But what you previously saw is interconnected, or it's at least a layer on what you're now viewing now. Like there's a new view that you're seeing it through, but the thing that you just saw previously still exists in a sense.
yeah.
And the other one, if you're a Marvel fan, for any of my Marvel fans out there, in the Doctor Strange movies, they have the mirror dimension, which is actually referenced quite a bit in other movies. But it's this idea of like this ever changing landscape that kind of warps and transforms. And that was something I even explored in my ayahuasca ceremony, but I'll leave that as another rabbit hole if you so decide to look down that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that it's not that any one thing or any one person is right, and it's not that any one thing or any one person is wrong. And this is something that I have difficulty with sometimes in my comment section, of people telling me I'm so wrong. And it's fascinating from my perspective, because I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, the perspective you're looking at the world with, you are correct. But what I'm trying to offer is almost this deeper, more inclusive, more broad, overarching truth that encompasses your perspective with what I'm trying to lay out as well.
Hmm. Yeah. I know what you mean. That's the way to be. Almost like a Renaissance man. A Renaissance man of self-inquiry, or at least inquiry of the world that you live in. And at least you're asking the question, right? At least you're curious. That's the first step. That's the biggest thing about this path, is to at least just have even if it's just a little sense of curiosity, and to not be so rigid in our viewpoint of life and how we see the world. Because, you'll probably admit that you don't know everything, and you probably know that the more you know about yourself, the more that you don't know about yourself in the world that you live in. But that doesn't stop you from going on the journey of this self-discovery, right? So from what I'm getting at from my first question is that why you serve is really just like you're sharing your journey of self-discovery and discovery of the world that you live in. And if anybody wants to join along the way, they can. And that's your servitude.
Yeah, I think that's put beautifully. And I see it as, and I think something you said in between there, which my mind's like kind of picking up on, is this idea of not like almost attaching to an idea. Like usually whenever I come up with a new idea or my perspective shifts, I'll do my best to frame it in the sense of, this is my current understanding at the time, or this is the highest level of truth that I've found so far, and I'm open to updating it.
Yeah.
So, and I try to make that clear as well as I can on my podcast. But I mean, sometimes you can't be perfect. You can't say it all the time. But there is this undercurrent of me always trying to say that, like, based on all of the puzzle pieces that I've found in my mosaic, here's the best truth that I have at pinpointing what is the deepest truth of this mosaic that it's trying to tell us. And I'm down to update it, because you put in another mosaic piece, it might completely transform the picture, even, deeper and more complex than I could ever even possibly imagine. I feel like I've gotten to a pretty good point of explaining things past, like, I don't even know how to articulate that, because it actually kind of feels wrong. I was going to say that I feel like I have a pretty good sense of what's going on, but I mean, anytime that I've thought that in my past, it's just the next day I'll be exposed to something that will completely blow my mind open. And then I
Hmm.
have to like rearrange the mosaic pieces and be like, okay, now how do all these fit? Because I know this is true. I know that's true. I know this is true. So, like, how do these all fit into that bigger picture? And so, the key that I just wanted to really emphasize there is not being attached to a certain idea or belief, because not only am I changing and evolving, but so are you. So is the listener. So is my podcast. So is your podcast. So is everybody in this entire world. So what might have been fundamentally true or I've believed to be true in the last year of my life might not be true tomorrow or the day after that.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Ever evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not like we give up the journey to this so-called truth, the capital T truth. You know what I mean? It's like, even though it's probably this infinite journey to truth and this infinite inquiry within ourselves, that gives me more conviction to explore the mystery to myself. You know what I mean?
For sure. And this is something, and it's interesting too, because this is something that is not just something that's spoken of spiritually. You can see people in business, you see people in sports echo this same exact sentiment,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, or
Mm-hmm.
the journey is the destination. It's that progress that you're going to have throughout your life that you're trying to seek a deeper answer, a deeper perspective, a deeper conscious perspective. Shout
There it
out the
is.
title of the podcast. uh, but like, and I mean, I think it's also perfectly wrapped up in the title of my podcast as well, which is traveling to consciousness. It's like, and I think that might also be, I'm just putting this together now, an issue that scientists have with actually defining what consciousness is, because there is no scientific definition for the word. So there
Mm.
is a high probability that it is so ever changing that you can't really define it, because at the moment you define it, it almost becomes something else.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way you can define consciousness because within I guess the sphere of consciousness, once you go to define it, you're taking yourself away from the phenomena of just here and now, the isness, the consciousness. And then once you subject it to literally subject it, once you subject it to an object and subject separation of language, then it just from there takes away from the magical mystery of consciousness of being a human being. So I always laugh at scientific studies of, so and so has a certain theory on consciousness. I'm like, that just write that first sentence right there, has a theory on consciousness, automatically negates it in my mind because there's no theory, there's no mathematical rationale that you could associate to this phenomena of consciousness. Like consciousness can't figure out consciousness. There's nothing to figure out. That's the only thing to figure out, is that there's nothing really to figure out. Um, you know what I mean? Like the ultimate mystery of consciousness. Not saying there aren't things to connect to. Like there's still dots to connect here in the mystery of what's playing out here in consciousness. But like the theory to capital C consciousness, that's like explaining God. That's like, you just can't. There's no way that you could go about that whatsoever. But that doesn't mean we give up the journey, and doesn't mean that we just automatically say that it's not possible. Even though I just kind of said that in a way, when I just laugh at when science, like, they publish headlines like that. But I think it's still like an honorable attempt to do it. I'm not gonna shun people for trying to do that in scientific terms. I think there's definitely value in that, but I don't think there's ever going to be a point where we're like, okay, got it figured out, this is why we're here, this is consciousness, the meaning of life, boom, that's it. That's not like that. Like we said, the cliche, the journey is the destination, where we are literally, we are consciousness figuring out consciousness, and that is the journey, that is the destination. And does it ever end? I don't think so. Yeah, man.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that you said in there, and this was kind of about God. And I grew up Presbyterian, so I was, identified, I guess, as Christian, but majority of my life would it have been majority of my life. Yeah, it still would have been a majority of my life. I would have identified as Christian. And what you're highlighting there has always been something now that I'm on this spiritual journey that I've always found interesting is, how do you have God play an actor in a story? Because to me, God is the what I would define as God. My definition is the universal energy that governs or is in everything.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because the Bible kind of echoes this as well. It's the energy that's in me, to you, to a laptop, to an angel, to the sun, to the earth. So to create a character and portray this character as God, you're almost taking a subsection of God and only labeling a little bit of it as the true entity, which I would define as God. And so that was a big thing in my kind of questioning process of like, man, like how do we even determine what the universal energy that governs everything is? And then your guys are going to put it as a main character in a story. So that was something that always perplexed me as well, was like, okay, so if God's a character in the story, then what's bigger than God? Because, I
Yeah.
personally believe there's an energy, there's a frequency, there's a vibration that connects every single person, every single thing.
Hmm.
And so if you're going to label something as God, like what's God made of, you know?
Yeah, exactly, man. That's like the cliche question, what created God? What was
Yeah.
before God? You can't,
Yeah.
there is no definition for that. But yeah, popular spirituality in quotes, in today's world likes to put it in a nice box and ship it to you just like this. This is God from some guy in a collared shirt. Here you go. This is what God is. But it doesn't allow one to really explore the idea of God within themselves. And I think that's really how you get to the juiciness of God, this God essence that connects all of us, that is centrifugal to all of us, is you have to find that within yourself. There's no way that anybody's going to be able to give it to you in a book or some guy preaching. It doesn't really work like
For
that,
sure.
man. Yeah. There's no equation for God. The only equation is to go within. That's what I would recommend. But even then, it's like, that's
Well, so
still, I
it's,
can't. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so there's, no, you're good. I guess I'm feeling called to add this because for the longest time, like during the beginning of my spiritual awakening, my whole process, I was very much on that same page of go within. Sexual trauma I had when I was a kid that I was storing in my body. And when certain things would occur on the outside world, it would trigger this lack of knowing within me that would then create confusion in my outer world. And I'm actually very much at I guess, a season in my life where I'm actually trying to almost focus more on the outside world. Now, what do I mean whenever I say that? I mean, focus on things that occur with me in my life. It's almost like how you're even saying, and how I've always heard it explained. And I'm sure listeners of your podcast have heard this explained this way as well, where go within. If you don't go within, you go without. You need to understand what's going on the inside. And I'm 100% for that. What I'm trying to articulate is the next step is just as much stuff that happens in this external world to you or for you is just as valid as everything inside your internal world. So you can actually start playing with this, where if you start treating every single thing that you see in your outside world, whether it's something you hear in this podcast, whether it's somebody texting you, as a sign, as a message from God, the universal source of everything, then you can kind of start finding answers in the physical world as you would internally, because it has that same mirror, has the same mirror,
Yeah.
has the same reflection that you're going to see. Internally,
Hmm.
you'll feel it. Externally, you'll see it. And
Yeah.
where this kind of gets weird for people, especially if people are just starting this, I suggest you hesitate with sharing it to people who are not aware, because they'll interpret this thing completely different than you will. If I saw a blue jay and it came and sat on my finger, I guarantee you that Gary's going to interpret that far different than Clayton is. And one of your listeners is going to interpret that different. But then if I see a blue jay land on my finger and then I see a blue jay here, I see another blue jay there, that's going to create a repetitious pattern. And you're going to be like, huh, what is it that the world is trying to tell me about blue jays? Or what am I thinking about whenever I'm seeing blue jays? And so you start seeing these things and you realize, okay, something's trying to be communicated with me. Now, at that point, you could take it to meditating. You could take it into your internal world and say, okay, what is this symbolic representation? And that's a whole different line down the modalities. The key thing that I just wanted to bring up here is that as much as people say to go within, you can also see the same parallels in your external world. Like the universe is going to communicate with you in the external world as long as you're open to receiving it.
Yeah, I like that, man. Mm-hmm. As above, so below. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like you can, I mean, yeah, you can go within so much, and then one can realize that once you go within, that everything is within. Everything is yourself, right? The cliche saying is go within yourself, man. You gotta find yourself within yourself. But everything is the self when you look at it in the right way. So yeah,
For
it's
sure.
just how we look at it. Like we said, man, it's all perspective. It's all perspective. And I guess that's not downplaying meditation whatsoever. I think there's definitely a secret sauce to meditation. But yeah, once you can, and I'm definitely finding that out as well very recently, is that it's not as important per se as I thought it was. Like the idea of meditation and having to meditate is actually could just be another detriment, like another attachment. So it's like having to, like, the essence is not even be attached to the idea of being unattached through going within in meditation. The outside world is also, this outside world, quote unquote, is also just as much as a spiritual pursuit as meditating, or going in a cave and fasting, and going on certain meditation retreats, yoga, whatever it is. The introspection is just as important as I think you use the term extrospection, right? I think I've
Oh,
seen it on your videos.
extraceptive. Oh, nice. Okay, that
Extroceptive,
was the
yeah,
one you saw. Yeah. I
yeah,
learned that from the Huberman Lab. He had a really nice podcast about meditating. And so, yeah, the idea was like introceptive versus extroceptive. So, like, introceptive is like the go within idea, sitting cross legged in your room, closing your eyes. But you can very much have an extroceptive perspective. And the Power of Now with Eckhart Tolle also mentions this, where if you just go out in your front yard and like focus on a tree and try to focus on every little detail of that tree, focus on every single leaf, focus on just like its pure state of being.
yeah,
That's an extroceptive perspective. And the idea is like it's outside of your skin. So this is kind of where like the physical reality or physical domain kind of comes into it, is extroceptive, focus on things that are outside the physical layer of your skin, introceptive being on the inner perspective of your skin. Did I say that right? I think I said that right.
seems right, yeah.
Seems right. Good enough for me.
Yeah. And what is that really about? If you could explain why we do that, why, to somebody that doesn't do any meditation, whether it's outwardly or inwardly, why is that important? Even though we said it's not so important, it's important to do, but also important to recognize that that's not the answer, right? But if we could explore the importance of meditation firstly, like, how would you explain simply why meditation, whether it's outwardly or inwardly, is important to the seeker?
The only reason, well, I don't know if that's fair, because the first thing I would note is that all I know for sure is that meditation was a part of my awakening process, of my becoming calm. I no means want to suggest that you have to do it per se, but there is, with high degree of certainty, scientifically speaking, that it does help you manage your emotions more, help you with progressing in your life in the ways you want to progress. But where the importance comes in, and this is where the importance came in my life, which I remember watching a video from after school on YouTube. Shout out Mark Wooding, super cool dude. Had him on the podcast a long time ago. He portrayed in his video how, and I think it was with an Eckhart Tolle as well, where we're not the thinker, we're not the thoughts that are coming and racing through our head, because this comes back to attachment. And I still do this to this day, and everybody does it to every day, is that we have thoughts come into our head and we attach with certain ones and believe, we put energy into them to say that they are true. I am unworthy of XYZ. Honestly, I don't want to go through the negatives because speaking it out loud reinforces it, right? So, the positive side with it is I am making money loving what I'm doing. I am the creator of my world. I am, and a lot of us have these positive thoughts, but don't even realize it, because our mind, the way that we have biologically been created, is to seek out danger, seek out fear, seek out things that are going to hurt us. So a lot more people are going to fixate on the negative, whether it's a lack mentality, whether it's scarcity, whether it's money, whether it's getting a promotion at work. We start creating these thought patterns, these thought loops that get ingrained in our subconscious. Now, where that all starts is it possibly, or more likely, was ingrained in your subconscious beforehand, and now you're just logically understanding it. So the goal now is to just become aware. If that's your goal, it depends on who you're talking to. But what I suggest is that you should become aware of those thoughts or those thought patterns that you have within yourself that are repeating, that are on loop. And what I have found is that meditation is the best way to come in contact with those thoughts, realizing that you are not your thoughts. You are something far greater than your thoughts, something far greater than this physical being, something far greater than just what you label yourself as, whether it's a podcast host, whether it's by your first name, whether it's by your job title. You are far greater than all of those things that you just subjugate yourself down into in this physical domain. And where meditation comes in handy, and where I have seen it do a lot of work for myself, and honestly, Dr. Joe Dispenza has put out phenomenal amount of work on this, where you can actually lower your brain waves. So where I was talking earlier about the subconscious and conscious mind, between the ages of 0 and 7, you're in a theta brainwave pattern, which means you're basically just like pure subconscious. It's just you're a little sponge. You're literally taking in anything that people are telling you. You are just absorbing it and holding it almost as if it's your own truth. I believe, who was it? Damn, I'm going to forget which religious group it was, but they even said like, hey, you show me a kid between the ages of 0 and 7, and I'll tell you the man that kid is going to become. And the core point is that between the ages of 0 and 7, you get data dumped all these things. And then you just then your conscious mind kicks in whenever your brainwaves then elevate up to alpha, beta, and even gamma brainwaves. And well, maybe not gamma. I don't know if consciously you can get there to gamma, but I'm getting a little off the topic. The point is though, is that your conscious mind, your logical mind kicks in and says, okay, I'm in control now. So we have this like little ego thing come in. However, the subconscious mind is still creating the thoughts and the prophecies that it was told whenever it was between the ages of 0 and 7. I've even heard some people say 12. The point though is that through meditating, you can lower your brainwave patterns into that theta state, into the subconscious mind, which is literally when you're accessing the subconscious mind, and reprogram them. Of course, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes effort, it takes a little bit of everything. But once you can get to that spot, use that reprogramming tool, you can then experience a different reality that you choose to experience, whatever that is. And it's, I say a lot that this is all a choose your own adventure. People don't realize that because they're stuck to those stories. They're stuck to those beliefs, those ideas, those patterns that were conditioned into them whenever they were just a kid, when they were younger.
Yep.
And so the whole beauty of meditation is to kind of be able to use those new thought process to then not push them, but to integrate them into a more healthy, a more aligned way that you actually want to operate in this world. Again, I don't know that it's the only way. You don't have to do it, but it's definitely the way that I've found a lot of clarity in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Same. Yeah, you don't have to do it, but highly recommended.
Yeah.
Highly recommended for sure. Yeah, man. It's really it brings for me, speaking from personal experience, it brings a sense of awareness to those primal and tribal tendencies that we were conditioned into of fear, competition, um, yeah, survival instincts that are just ingrained in us, like I said, from the tribe in a way, just to make it so that you can survive in a way. And then, yeah, as you slowly start to progress as a conscious being and you get into this questioning and curiosity about yourself through meditation, through psychedelics, whatever it is, you'll be able to realize that maybe I'm not those lower tendencies that were ingrained in me my whole life, that are maybe even also a part of our DNA. You know, it's there's a lot of nurture to it, but I think there's also a lot of nature to our lower tendencies as well. But either way, meditation is a way to become aware of those lower tendencies. And then, yeah, man, from there, you do realize that, wait a second, I don't have to become, these things aren't the master of me. I'm the master of the mind. And that's really when the switch happens. When you can say, well, they're still going to be present. Like I'm still going to have those tendencies, but it's almost like, how do I play with that? How do I take that energy and almost transmutate that in a way that's better for my being and better for growth, pureness, harmony, whatever it is. Just make it so that these lower tendencies of our almost like animalistic, I guess you could say, tribalistic, is not not dictating how I live. Like I stay as the master, and I think that is a culmination of the spiritual path. If you really want to simplify it and put it in a, you know, in a box to hand it to somebody, like I said, I think the spiritual path is realizing that you have a sense of the creator within you, and it starts with becoming aware. Everybody has their own journey to that. We can get into yours a little bit later, but it starts by becoming aware of your God-given power, you know, becoming aware that you're not your thoughts, becoming aware that you can change your thoughts, maybe change your thought patterns. And then from there, doing it to serve not only yourself, but serve the world. So it's almost like, if you want to look at it as a two-step process, very simplified in my view. Become aware of what you are, or at least become aware of the journey to what you are, the awareness that you're not your thoughts. And then from there, find that, like, it's almost like this intuitive guidance, intuitive power that we all have, intuitive creation. Use that creation to hopefully better your life and better the world. And then from there, that's when it gets fun. That's when the journey starts, you know. That's when the fun starts.
Yeah, I feel you on that, man. I feel like that's kind of where I'm at this point, is where it's just starting to get fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still up and downs, and I'm still becoming more and more aware of myself, of the things that I would rather have or rather do. But yeah, it becomes fun once like all of this kind of is for fun. There's an interesting quote. I forget who said this, but it was something along the lines of, the gods made for fun what humans take for real. And it's like, majority of this is, and I know this can be triggering to people because I just know, but a lot of this can just be fun. You can just, if you're taking something serious, you're probably taking it too seriously, because think about it. We're here for 80 years, a blip on the radar of human existence or evolution, whatever you want to call it. And 99.999% of people get forgotten. I mean, don't even get me wrong. You can't probably tell me someone who lived on Earth 10,000 years ago. I mean, if you want to really challenge yourself, go 15,000 years, and the entire universe has been around for well over, I think they're still trying to figure out the exact number, but well over 15 billion years, something like that. So like, you know, and another 10,000 years, it's like, Clayton, am not, like, nobody's going to be talking about me. The only thing that I hope is at least that I'm able to send a mind awareness ripple throughout what it means to be human, that can then serve people throughout their life and hopefully help serve other people, and at least take us out of this, what seems to me, a deep state of nihilism that we have kind of running throughout at least the Western society. I don't know how rampant it really is, but it seems to be pretty large. And so my hope is at least that as long as I'm living the best that I can and putting forth information like this whole meditation conversation that helps me transform my life into be feeling more aligned and more giving, then it can help somebody else as well.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. I feel that, man. Yeah. And it's like leaving a legacy, but not an egotistic legacy. It's like leaving a legacy that hopefully, I don't know, we'll see, hopefully will help at least one person in the future. Maybe one person will decide to look at their life a little bit differently from the work that we're doing, or maybe not. Who knows? Either way, like we kind of started this whole thing, is we're doing this for ourselves. And then if anybody wants to join along, they can. This is like it's a communal sharing journey to the self, capital S self, in a way. It's yeah, man. But ultimately, it's leaving a legacy that isn't, like I said, it's not for look at me, look how cool I was. I had a YouTube channel, or I did this, or I got this far in my spiritual awakening. No, it's not like that. I think I'm on the same wavelength as you, man. It's like giving back a little bit. And I think that's what servitude is all about. That's what being a human, I think, is all about. Giving back a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to make a podcast or have a YouTube channel. It could be a legacy of just whatever it is, whatever we're all good at. I think we all have a knack for something as a human being. I truly believe that. We're all put here for some kind of purpose. There's no such thing as randomness. You weren't just born on accident. Even if you were an accident, you were supposed to be here. We were supposed to have some kind of purpose, I guess you could say. And that's what we're all looking for. But that's what's important from this, I believe, from going on this spiritual path, is you gain that sense of purpose. And then in that sense of purpose is a sense of legacy. And even if it's just, even if it's not a legacy that's like literally an art form or online, maybe if it's just a legacy of, how do I explain this? Like you were a good servant in, the way that you cooked food, or the way that you raised your kids. And people, when you're dead and gone, people be like, oh, that Gary guy or that Clayton guy, he was a good dude for what he did. He was a good dude. And I think that's what the human experience is about, man. We're not just trying to fulfill our pleasures and go from desire to desire to desire. I think it's a little bit deeper than that. It's like, how do you give back here? How do we give back? And this is how we started the whole thing, man. Like I asked you, like, how do you serve and why do you serve? And I think that's what somehow, some way, like when you go within on this journey, you'll find out that being a human being, from my point of view, I'm not trying to put this point of view on anybody else. From my point of view, being a human being is being a servant. Like there's an essence in us that is it's not just random atoms. Like I said, like we're here to be of servitude to this greater force that connects us all. And that's our purpose. If we're all looking for a sense of purpose, which I think coincides with that purpose, is happiness and peace and placement here, right? Which we're all supposed to be. We can get into that a little later. But with that purpose is like I don't know what the word is, but the opposite of nihilism. There's probably a word for that, but it's the opposite of feeling like there's no purpose here. It's the feeling of, I'm supposed to be here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to give back while I'm here for the 80 to 100 years. And then from that, hopefully,
fulfillment's probably the closest word
fulfillment,
I can think of.
I like that. Yeah, fulfillment. And then fulfill the needs of others while we're here, the 80 to 100 years, and then that will be my legacy. And it's not an egotistical legacy. It's a totally different way to look at it. It's just a way to give back while we're here, just because we can, and not just because we can, but just because that's the way. That's like we should, in a way. Even though there's no should or shouldn't, I feel like that intuitive guidance almost directs one to that sense of, yeah, maybe I should do this. Maybe I shouldn't just sit on the couch and eat Doritos and watch Netflix. Not that there's anything wrong with that here and there, but there's a sense of like, orientation that comes to the path and how we conduct ourselves as a human being, which thus contributes to our legacy. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's interesting too, because sitting on the couch and just eating Doritos is something that I probably need to do a little bit more of.
It's all about balance.
Exactly. It's about balance. But what's also super interesting, and this ties in well, is the idea of reincarnation. And I find it so fascinating because there is ample, ample evidence for reincarnation being a thing. From kids, for anyone that doesn't know this, there are ridiculous amounts of studies where kids between the ages of usually 3 and 6 remember past lives. I was just watching a video where a kid remembered actually being in World War II, and they like went back and like found everything that he was saying, and it was like factually accurate stuff that there was no way this kid was going to know. There's a chick whose name is Om Seti who like fell on her head. She was pronounced legally dead. She came back to life and like believed that she was like this Egyptian goddess, and then actually has helped Egyptian archaeologists find cities that they didn't even know existed. Wow. And was like pointing to all these different things. So the whole point I'm trying to get at here is just that reincarnation is real. If we want to go down that rabbit hole of why it's real, we can do that. But the core point that I'm bringing it up to relate it back to what we were just talking about is like, if I'm going to be reincarnated, I want to know that I'm going to be reincarnated into the best world that I can possibly be reincarnated in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what does that look like? That looks like me helping other people. That looks like me going out of my way to do things, me awaking people up to new perspectives on reality. It looks like me being more caring towards people, me living my best life, for lack of a better phrase, because I know down the road when, hypothetically, because I think we all have a choice based on what I've found, but when and or if I reincarnate, I want to come back into the best world that I possibly can. And us having amnesia, not remembering that we reincarnate, it's like, if I'm not going to remember that, I want to set myself up, my future self up for having that best life possible. And it's interesting. I'm just putting this together now. People, when they have kids, I don't have any kids, so I can't speak to this personally, but when people have kids, they talk about how they have like this new perspective on the world and on life, and they start actually worrying about the future a little bit more. Like they actually worry about the life that they're going to hand to their kids. And I'm kind of, I guess, even doing that from perspective of, well, if I'm going to be reincarnated, I want to set up the best world for me as a 5-year-old in 2300, whatever it is,
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do with that, but that's kind of, I guess, where to add on to reasons that you may want to spread kindness.
Yeah, man.
Just putting that out there.
Yeah, for sure. You can look at it like that. You can also look at it like, even if it's your vantage point is going to be reincarnated into another being, another point of view of the collective consciousness, well, that may be a thing, probably is a thing. But then you could also look at, even if it's not a thing, there's still going to be other human beings here, which are also a sense of you, that are going to live on past Clayton, which if you find out within yourself enough, that you can find out that yourself is also other selves. So yeah, you can look at it like that. I may be reincarnated into a future that I better build a little bit better. Or you can look at it like, well, other people are going to be existing in the future. And I know that other people are essentially just an extension of myself, so I better build that better future for them. So it goes either way. And I think it's both. I think it's both, that my vantage point is going to be reincarnated into, my energy goes on in a way. My energy transfers into another bodily form. But then also on top of that, other people, we're reincarnating together in a way. It's like we're going to be just reincarnated into another realm. And yeah, it's all up to how we create it, bro. It's all up, like, what kind of energy do you want to put forth here? I believe that. I do believe that, man. I think it's like, sometimes I think, when the whole idea of dying, going to heaven or hell in, Abrahamic religions, Christianity, is really just the idea of reincarnation. And when you reincarnate, are you going to be in a hellish reincarnation, or are you going to be in a heaven-like reincarnation? It's not really like a separate abode. There's not a separate realm per se. It's just really just later on in time. Sometimes I think that's how it is, because there's no such thing as a separate, like all is one. Like everything is just one thing here. There's no different realms. There's no such thing as heaven, once you can kind of grasp that all is one. So in order for there to be a future heaven or hell, then it would obviously have to be reflected in a sense of like reincarnation, as I see it. Sometimes that's how I think about. I mean, obviously nobody knows, but I think that is how it is, man. And it's weird too, because doesn't reincarnation just feel right to you? Like there's something in me
Mhm.
that just like, yeah, that just makes sense. Like if you were to like discern that rationally within, and like why all things happen, it's because of cause and effect. It's because of karma. And then we build our karma through lifetimes. Like it just makes sense to me. You know what I mean? Like there's just something, the more I go deeper within myself, I'm like, oh, yeah, that obviously. It seems almost obvious. Strange.
Well, yeah, no, what you're touching on is actually quite profound. I think it's something we need to, as a society, investigate a bit more. I know I've investigated this within my own life, and it's led me to profound paths, which is just that deep state of knowing, right? Like you can just feel that there's truth in something that somebody is saying. And it's a crazy feeling because you can't explain it. You can't put it into words. You can't articulate what it is. You just know that it's true. There's something about you. It's like, dude, fuck, there's something true about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that I think A, led me down this path in the first place. But B, we were talking just before this about the polarization that I see in my comment section of the polarity of being like, oh shit, like, yes, 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 this is 100% true. I always knew this was true, blah, blah, blah. Or the other end of the spectrum where it's like, you're insane. This dude's an idiot. Like, this dude needs to just shut up. Like, you're going to hell. You're the devil, blah, blah, blah. And where it gets interesting is exactly what you're saying is, if there's this kernel of truth, this kernel of knowing within us, I might have set that up a little bit wrong. But the point that I was trying to get at is that there are people who seem to be identified with certain truths or that certain feeling of knowing. And I think everyone can get there, but there might be people who certain truths actually trigger them. And it's interesting because I've noticed in my life, whenever I've been triggered, usually in the past in political discussions, way before I was, let's say, conscious,
Mm-hmm.
I started to realize that whenever I got triggered in conversations, it was likely because I didn't know something. It was almost like this egoic protection of me being wrong about something. And so now I am very almost hyper aware whenever I get into a conversation with someone and I want to say that they are wrong, that it's likely me not knowing something. I don't know something, and thus I have this visceral reaction to dispel them as being wrong, as being a heretic, as being anti whatever I stand for, whatever I align, whatever I identify with, whatever I am aligned with, whatever I like am attached to, because I don't want to let that go. And so there's like something within me that pushes it back against it. And this is the beautiful thing about the Matrix. Well, it's called a movie, but it's really a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when you expose someone too quickly, too rapidly to the Matrix, they're going to fight it back. They'll fight back against it because it's not comfortable. They're not used to being uncomfortable. So they don't want to explore past their realm of perceived comfort. And they would rather sit in that bubble of comfort as opposed to go out and be like, oh yeah, reincarnation's real. It feels right. But there's something about that feeling right that I think not only the people who agree with it feel, but also the people who adamantly disagree with it. But I don't know what their mental connection is between that feeling of it being right and their resistance to either exploring it deeper or at least being open-minded to it. I'm not sure what the connection is there, but I know that there has to be something where, like, if you're so vehemently against something that you feel like there has to be some truth to it, but you just don't want to explore what that truth is.
Yeah, I think it's just our attachment to our identity of the story that we tell ourselves about.
It could be very just ego. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know within myself, definitely have been guilty of that. Like just something that I hold so firm in my being, like this has to be true. I don't, and I, for some reason, I feel like it's part of, like, you know, you can see it represented in, like you said, politics or really anything. People feel as though that it's a part of them, and if they're wrong, no one likes to be wrong. It's like yeah, it's definitely like an egotistical thing. It's a very lower nature thing, I think, to hold our beliefs as a sense of our identity. So then from there, we don't ever really want to explore other viewpoints. You know, it's almost like it's like a self defense mechanism. It seems,
Sure.
and if you admit that you're wrong, then you open yourself up to um, I don't know, just being vulnerable, I guess. No one wants to be wrong. We want to say like this, like you said, it's comfort to be like, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is me. I got it all figured out. It's a sense of order. But then when you can, on the other side, like hold things to be true, but then also be able to explore that they might not be true, there's a sense of freedom in that. There's being able to do that is like being able to be vulnerable essentially is that's a huge part of the path. Being able to admit that you're wrong, being able to admit that you don't have it figured out, that's a huge part of the path and a huge part of really getting to it, being able to see through your egotistical illusions that you've had built up. I think it's just like something that we have ingrained in our bones, in our DNA, in our blood to like have that sense of that idea of my beliefs are right, this isn't wrong. Is that kind of is that striking a chord with you? You know, does that make sense?
It's probably, I mean, there's certainly something to it being safe, to holding on to being what's safe, right? Like, what's the safe answer?
Yeah, survival
I know.
essentially.
Yeah, I know there was a conversation I was having with somebody who I was telling them about very open minded, let's say, well, the social aspect. I think at least that's what's starting to kick in because I was talking to this kid who's very open minded about these things I talk about. And I started telling him about cloud bursting, which is essentially your ability to burst or I don't know how to describe it, erase a cloud in the sky. You know, using your conscious perspective to actually manipulate energy to remove a cloud.
I've never
They
heard of
call it
that.
cloud bursting.
Wow.
It's super fascinating. I've done it a couple times too. And where it gets interesting is I was telling this kid about it. I was like, hey, this is like, he's like, oh, like what else? Da, da, da. And the conversation was like cloud bursting. This is what it is. This is how it happens. So it came up again. He's like very interested. It came up again in kind of like a more group setting. And one girl in that group was like, oh yeah, that's ridiculous. And like kind of scoffed it off. And he then very much agreed with her of like oh yeah. No, I agree that it's ridiculous, but I'm just interested by like what he's saying. You know, so there is a social element and there's this, which is another thing, which is like the conscious evolution of our humanity as a whole, which is another thing we can talk about. But, you know, the level at which we all collectively believe something to be true as a human species, it becomes true. It's, I don't know what a good example of this is. If, for example, nobody looked up in the sky and nobody knew that there was a moon, right? Like as a collective species of humans, we all just never looked up and we said that the moon doesn't exist, then it would not exist. It wouldn't be a thing. And you say, okay, well, the tides would still be coming in and out on the shores. And I'm like, yeah, they would. But we would have a different reason or a different meaning associated with why the tides come in and out. I don't know what that meaning would be because we just compartmentalize, okay, moon, sky, gravitational pull, waves. But if the moon wasn't there, we would have a different explanation for why we perceive and interact with things the way we interact with them. I mean, even if we could never see the moon, but then we had like a total lunar eclipses, right? Where the moon passed in front of the sun. Like even those, it's like, I don't know what's the words I'm looking for here. Like we would have to find a new way to explain the sun getting blacked out for, 8 seconds every, I don't know how often it actually happens, but every so many years. So, all of this to kind of just be a lens into, if you say something isn't real, if you don't believe something's not real, then You know, in your defense, you're right, because that's only the conscious perceptive nature that you're allowing yourself to explore. That's all the deeper you're looking to evolve. And I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a utility in having people that don't push the boundary that far, because we do need some sort of grounding. We need some sort of base level of understanding that we all can agree upon of
Yeah.
being true, and we hold to that, and then we're able to kind of like play with things that are above our control. Like if everybody on earth had the ability to burst clouds, I don't know, maybe that would be a bad thing. Maybe we're not at the conscious evolution of human consciousness. And when I say human consciousness, I mean like our collective consciousness.
Hmm.
Maybe the human collective consciousness isn't at a level yet where we are able to appropriately handle the powers of cloud bursting or telekinetic or telepathy, because there's even scientific studies that have proven that telepathy is a real thing. You know, so if we still haven't unlocked what I would call dormant psychic abilities within our own human body, I personally believe that there's a level of our conscious awareness that we need to evolve and become more aware of. Because if we had those abilities right now, with the egos and the, you know, everything else that's going on in the world, then it's likely that it wouldn't be in our best interest, our best long-term evolutionary interest of a society, or even as an individual, to experience that at this point in time. But in 100, maybe 150 years, it probably will be less, based on the way that our conscious perceptive is evolving. Like I'm sure it'd be less than, you know, 50 to 75 years. That'd be a pretty wild prediction. I'll make that prediction now. I bet within like 75 to 100 years, probably less, you know, we'll start seeing these psychic abilities come more online, and more people will actually be diving into these things. Now, of course, there's a caveat of, do we actually want to experience that reality as a collective? Maybe we're too deep into the matrix at this point to, you know, explore these ideas, to actually try them, to evolve these powers. But I know for damn sure, whenever I have kids and they come up to me and be like, Dad, I think I'm telekinetic, I'm going to nurture the shit out of that. I'm going to be like, show me, bud. Like, how did you do it? Like, how are you able to pull this off? You're talking with the dead? Okay. Like, talk to me about this. I'm not going to take what my parents' approach was, which was like dismiss and deny that these things aren't real, because I mean, they very much are real and are operating at a different frequency than what I believe our current human collective consciousness is able to perceive, or to even allow theoretically to be true.
Hmm. Yeah, man, I feel that. I mean, what it really comes down to is there's more than meets the eye to what it means to be a human being. It's a
For
little
sure.
more than just the five senses and the materialism of the Matrix per se. There's way more than what, you know, CDs. We're capable of way more than what we've been told. And are we mature enough? Are we wise enough to have that at this point? I don't think so, man. I don't think so. We have to wise up first and become loving. And then I think from there we create out of that more loving spirit. Before we get the force powers of Star Wars, before we get taken into the dark side, um, we need to wise up first so we don't get succumbed to the dark side. And who knows? Some people probably would even say that that's happening right now. Like these, you know, I guess you could say magic with a K is happening right now. We're currently under a spell of this magic with a K, of the dark side, of the cabal, of the, you know, the dark lodge, maybe you could say. That it's currently happening right now, and we're under some kind of weird satanistic curse, and it's happening right now, and they're dampening those powers that each and every one of us has. And maybe they have those powers, like these special few people, they have access to these CDs, and they're using them to hold power just within like their small group, and they're keeping it from the people. Most likely, probably, if it's a thing, that's probably what's happening, if I had to guess. But I don't think you can hold that back anymore. I think the cat's out of the bag to our power. And not saying everybody's going to be, you know, have force powers and have telekinesis and being able to levitate and stuff like that. I don't think it's really about that. I think it's really just being able to, I mean, it's like, yeah, we're all going to have that, but once we wise up, we're going to use that energy to create a better world, like to create we're all going to be on the same wavelength with those powers in a way. And maybe that's the only way that we could have access to those CDs. Maybe there's power in numbers. Like I've heard stories of this is going pretty far out, but we're already there. We're already far out. The pyramids were built by sound, and it was by them literally resonating at the frequency of the material of the blocks. So what was it? Granite maybe they used? I don't know. Whatever the atomic frequency of the material that they used. They got a group of people were able to sing literally at the frequency of those blocks that enabled them to have a telekinetic effect to be able to move the blocks within time and space into the form of the pyramids. Maybe that's what happened. I mean, it makes sense. It makes a little bit more sense than they did it mechanically back then without they didn't even have power equipment. They didn't even have shoes. Like, how did they build the pyramids? It makes a little bit more sense that they maybe possibly had powers like that in order to build structures like that. But yeah, what I'm getting at is maybe the only way that we have these CDs and telekinesis and telepathy is when we're all synced up to a higher wavelength of love. Like maybe it's like there's a certain threshold, right, where we get access to the CDs, but you have to be wise enough. It's almost like you're granted these abilities. You have to be wise enough to have that power. With great power comes great responsibility. So maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, I have no idea, but it feels like in order to have that, what comes along the way of wising up is the CDs. And it's almost like, it's like, here you go. Okay, you're not going to use this to take over the world. You're not going to use this to gain power. Here, you can have this. And I know I'm kind of being hypocritical because I said that maybe the cabal has it and they're using it, but I don't know. Real quick,
you're saying CDs. What is that short for?
Oh, a CD is like it's like a power, I guess you could say, in yoga that is literally described in sutras, that when you go, you
like Claire abilities.
Yeah, like literally like levitating, telepathy. Okay. Like certain kind of psychic abilities that you get. There's CDs. It's SIDDHI. CDs.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I thought you were saying like CD, like a CD-ROM.
Yeah, it sounds very similar.
Right. So, yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, man. It's literally in Yoga Sutras that we receive these CDs. So it makes sense that we've probably had this at one time and we forgot about it. But there's probably some people out there that still have the ability. But my question is, and I don't know if anybody has the answer, is like, do you have to resonate at love first in order to have these? Like, does it come along the way, or are you able to use these as part of the dark side, as part of the dark forces type of thing, And who knows? I don't know. But there's more than meets the eye to the human condition, is what I have to say to sum it up.
I think you have to at least raise your frequency or lower it far enough. So you're either, so people can be on this planet to serve themselves or to serve others. And what I have seen, based on what you're talking about right now, is the ability that if you are serving yourself, you can, align more with a lower frequency that then shows you or gives you these CDs, the powers that you're speaking of. And I believe this is something that kind of gets highlighted pretty much in every movie about how evil's about to take over. They're on the brink of carrying out their plan. And then the good kind of wise up, band together, and then destroy the evildoer. Because I believe that evil, based on this story, right? This is a story that we've been telling ourselves time and time again. So from my perspective, I believe that there are, powers who, what we would define as evil, being just like a lower frequency vibration, who want to serve themselves, who want to serve a lower energy and make that the default energy. I do believe that they probably have some level of these powers, or they do rituals or demonic, what we would call demonic, right? Just channeling lower frequencies in order to bring those up onto the planetary scale. Where it comes is like the people who are wise, the people who are aware that these are real powers, that these are available for us to use. We need to kind of come together and be like, hey, like, we're just as strong, if not stronger than, these evil, the I don't really want to use the word evil because evil is a weird word, but people who are using this for a lower frequency purpose. You can have fewer people who are looking at it for a higher frequency purpose, and they are able to, let's say, come together to, take out the evildoers. I mean, again, it's not, there's a reason that these movies that we've seen time and time again with the same core construct or plot, that some evil comes out of nowhere, tries to take over the world, and then it just takes a gang of a couple good people to just completely wipe out the evil. It's because it's just like, it's a story that happens again and again and again throughout human history. It just takes the good people to figure it out and put themselves together before the evil can completely wipe out, humanity or the human race. I mean, I don't know if that's fair to say. I don't think there's really evidence for that on Earth, but at least have control in such a way that sets back our abilities or our technological advancements, whether it is with sound or other abilities that we're not using, that is available to us. And maybe that's something that happens, that evil does win. And then whenever it has won throughout human history, like ancient apocalypse might be hinting at that, that whenever it wins throughout history. And again, this is something I'm just kind of making up on the spot. So I'm just kind of thinking this through with the mosaic pieces that I currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe if there are situations when evil or, these massive floods have wiped out humans, it's because good people never came together in order to prevent it. Maybe there was this belief that somebody else will do it. Maybe there was a belief that it wasn't as bad as we thought it was. So I don't really know. I'm trying to kind of work in my current understanding into the structure of like these new informations that we're talking about. But yeah, I'm not really sure I was going with that. Maybe it was more of just like a fun mental exercise, but
Yeah, I get it, man. I guess I feel that because along the way, I've come to explore the idea of, well, there seems to be a benevolent force in my life that I feel that aligns with essentially love. Like there's a sense of goodness that I can embody, that there is like a sense of light. I guess you could say light or dark. So that has me questioning, okay, well then is there actually a sense of this so-called evil? Are there the bad guys? And are there the good guys? Is there a good force and a bad force? And I know there's no good or bad. That's obviously oversimplifying and generalizing it. But there is balance. There is contrast within this universe that I like to explore. So if I can find the goodness in me, that sense of love, that sense of light, then there's a sense of me that's like, okay, well, if there is a sense of God, which is ultimate benevolence, then there has to be a sense of evil, right? Just for balance. There has to be, like, just within this yin and yang of our life, there has to be that darkness, right? So then, yeah, are they winning? That my current idea of like what's literally happening as we speak, it's like, well, I think what's happening is Babylon is crumbling. Is that the bad guys, the dark, the ones keeping us in the dark of our inner nature, they're kind of like, this is their last ditch effort to keep us in the dark. And there's definitely a lot of effort. There's a lot of noise to keep us confined in these little spaces of who we think we are. Because if it's a good and bad thing, right? This is, like I said, to anyone listening, this is obvious an oversimplification. If there's a good and a bad, a fight between like the cliche good and evil, the bad guys and the good guys want you to know what you are. The good guys, the good force is you waking up to you. It's yourself literally enabling yourself to become identified with your God-given right of free will and using that to accordingly create a better world and serve others, right? It's to be able to embody love, serve from love, create out of love, out of God. Kumbaya, right? The bad guys are trying to keep you in the dark, keep you identified with your five senses, your desires, your primal animalistic drives, your sense of lack, your sense of materialism, status, power, just like this competition aspect. When the good guys are more cooperation, love, the bad guys are competition. That's what, if there are good and bad, it's really like good is being able to find that capital S self, I, work from there, create out of love, the bad guys are really just there is no motive. It's really just chaos. You know what I mean? Like they're just like they're shedding they're creating the facade and the veil to this capital T truth that we can find. Well, I think from my understanding, I think that's crumbling right now. I think what's happening is that there is I don't know, man. I don't know. I think like there's one side of me that says yes, there is obviously this dark force that's keeping us in the dark, and there's another side of me that says no, that's just the natural way of the universe. But either way, there is a sense of whether it's deliberate or not, from some kind of small group of cabal, or it's just like in our human nature to lose ourselves. Whatever it is, we're off our rocker. So you can say it's the good guys or the bad guys, or the good tendencies within yourself or the bad tendencies. Well, the dark tendencies are coming to an end. I really do believe that. And it seems like it does seem like that cliche archetype of the fight between good and evil, right? And is that just like my mind creating that? I don't know. Is my mind creating some kind of drama for this human life and trying to, like, a sense of self-importance? I don't know. But it feels like when I go within that, no, there actually is in this humanly life almost like this spiritual war going on. We've all heard that before. I'm pretty sure anyone that's listening to this has heard that. Like, there's this spiritual warfare going on. But when you really swallow that pill and take that in, right, man? It's like, damn. Is there actually like is there actually a spiritual war going on? I think so. And like actually swallowing that pill, that's a big one, because then I come to realize in my own journey, it's like, oh shit, I got a bigger role to play here than I was led to believe. Like like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think anybody that's on this journey and has this kind of idea of themselves almost reaches a sense of obligation. I'm not saying anybody should or shouldn't do it, but like I feel within myself a sense of obligation to fight for that good. You know, almost like I was initiated into this weird order of the good guys as a Jedi in a way. And from there became a warrior to the light. And there's no other way that I could live my life, right? I don't feel like I could just get sucked back into the matrix again. Like I feel like there is that innate obligation to God, one could say. And that sounds crazy pompous, but I don't know any other way to put it. Like I feel like I need to, like we said, to serve, to give back to others. That's how we fight for the light, is that we just essentially serve others here. And I don't feel like I could live any other way at this point. Like once you can kind of realize that, like, yo, shit, man, there actually might be this grand story of humanity that's playing out right now. There might be. I'm not in any definite. I don't like to go in any definites, but it feels like we're involved in this grand story of humanity. Like the story didn't end in the Bible or the Quran. The story continues between good and evil, and we're literally living it right now. And I think this is like a grand climax. You know, some people say it's the end of Kali Yuga. We're moving into the Sat Yuga, which is a more enlightened golden era of humanity. Maybe this is the climax to that story of humanity right now. We all have a very important role to play in the bringing about of that new world. So we, touching back on it, reincarnate into that better world. It seems like when you go within, when I go within, that's kind of what's happening right now. Maybe I'm projecting some kind of ideation from watching a little too much Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, but I don't think so, man. I think those things are just representative archetypes of what's actually going on within ourselves, of the story that's actually going on at a collective right now. And to me, that's cool. That makes me feel like I do have some kind of like important purpose here as a human being. And I'm not just this struggling, woe is me human being. Like there is actually something pretty vast, probably way beyond my comprehension and understanding to be able to convey. But it feels like there's something pretty important. I don't even know if important is the right word, but there's something pretty vast going on within the story of humanity and the story of myself. But yeah, man, sorry, I went off on a little tangent there, but hopefully you and the listener can kind of understand and grasp what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, man, just trust that feeling. That's all I can really tell you.
Yeah. Do you feel that? Like there's it's not all just randomness. Like there's like we're aligned for a reason. Like what are we aligning to? We're aligning the fight for the good. That's what it feels like. And it's not like I don't want to sound like egotistical, like I'm some freedom fighter. Look at me. But it's like that just feels right. Like why would you not want to fight for not only your own freedom but the freedom of others? As above, so below. It's all the same. So I don't know. It just feels right, like within my heart. Like that's just what we have to do here, all in our own way, is to find the light within ourselves and shine it a little bit brighter to the world. And then with us, that's how we create this better world and how we evolve into the species that we were supposed to be. And then that's when we start building the pyramids with sound. Yeah, man. But yeah, I don't know where else we can go from here. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a thing there. It's just what happens, you know.
It's all good, man. Yeah, I could just say, just make sure you, yeah, I'd say just lean into that feeling of what feels right. I think that's something that all of us can do better. I even know in my day to day when I think about what feels right to do next. Sometimes, usually, it feels like something that sounds crazy to me, like go out and run or go do this or go do that. And it's like, no, I have to get all this other work and bullshit done. And what we come to realize is that there's usually workarounds. And this might be different for person to person. But sometimes there's things that we think we have to do, and our internal light or energy is telling us to do something else. And when we do that something else, we realize that we didn't need to do that other thing in the first place. So the best I can give you based on all that was just to keep following what feels right, what feels most in alignment with you and your goals in life, because progress isn't linear. So, sometimes you got to do things that are going to take you closer and further. Sometimes you got to do things that are going to take you further to get closer to what you're trying to get to.
I like that. That's good. You said psilocybin and ayahuasca, right? Like how did those experiences affect you and how did they bring you to where you are now?
So with psilocybin, so I was back in San Diego. I was working as a software engineer. There was a girl I was seeing at the time who was super, super dope. We just connected, like everything flew or like flow. It flowed. Yeah. Flew, but like in flowed. Flowed. Okay, so it flowed. I don't know why I felt like flew was the past tense of flow. But it flew by. It flew by and it flowed. Okay. Wow. I never made that connection before.
We're flowing and flying.
Yeah.
Flowing. Yeah.
Well, so our relationship was flowing and it just felt like I could say, do anything, be myself, essentially. Like I never felt that before in a relationship. We dated, I think, for we were going on dates. We were seeing each other for about a month and a half. And it felt like a year that we had known each other. Got to the point where she said, like, what are we? And my mind kind of collapsed. Like I started overthinking shit, I wasn't seeing anybody. I don't think she was seeing anybody either at the time. Like, logically it makes sense to be like, yeah, we're boyfriend and girlfriend. Like, obviously everything's so uniform and perfect. Like, why wouldn't we be? And it sent me down this spiral of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Of like not knowing and just not being sure and not feeling like I knew what the right answer was. And what happened is that over the next month, it slowly like dived out. It slowly dissolved our relationship. And about a month later, a friend of mine, we were playing volleyball, and a friend who I was playing volleyball with, one of his friends from college was walking by and she was like, oh, hey, like, what's up? They reconvened, we hung out, and she started telling me about basically that she administers psilocybin. And I was like, I feel like my life's pretty much perfect. The outside world tells me it's perfect. I'm a white male. My parents loved each other. Everything was good. But then this whole thing happened with my ex, and I don't know what happened. And And she was like, sure, we can go through it. Well, what ended up being revealed to me in the psilocybin therapy, which was, if you don't know, basically me taking a lot of mushrooms and then putting on a eye mask and like laying down and getting confronted with my mind, for lack of better words. And what came up was that there were sexual incidences in my childhood, like the first time I kind of experienced sexual stuff, that was not, what's the word I'm looking for here? Was not understanding love. Like it warped my perception of what it meant to love another person. And I had been aware that these things occurred, but I'd always just kind of pushed them off as knowing they were wrong without fully integrating what it meant for them to be wrong. Mm-hmm. So like, if you had asked me before that session, I'd have been like, yeah, these things are wrong. This isn't, the way that it should be conducted, blah, blah, blah. But what these events had done within me is taken me away from that knowing that we were talking about, away from that feeling of knowing what is true, what is real, what is the deepest truth that I can express. And so in those sessions, we kind of like healed it a bit, but it showed me that like my not knowing is what got triggered whenever, this ex of mine asked, what are we? It was what got triggered whenever that whole situation played out. And so I've kind of been on this journey of healing that inner wound, let's say, that more psychological trauma. And so that was kind of what I experienced with the psilocybin session the first time. I did 2 more of those. The very last one told me to quit my job. So I did that and started my podcast. And that was kind of how that whole thing started. And then ayahuasca was probably 6 months ago. And yeah, I did a whole podcast on that. It ended up being like a 4-hour long podcast where I told people like what I experienced and then the integration of it. So that's up there on my podcast. If you're looking for that, I think it's episode 45 or 45. So I'll just put that out there, but yeah, I don't know where you want to go with that, but I'll turn it back over to you.
So it allowed you to explore the inner workings of your mind, in a way, the imprints that were made in your childhood, to be able to digest them a little bit differently in your adulthood and how they affect your adulthood.
For sure.
And how you see yourself here and how you conduct yourself here. Yeah. That's psychedelics in a nutshell, man. If used right, if used in a healthy manner, that's what they allow us to do, is just kind of like see things, see yourself, see the things that happen, the events in your life from a slightly different viewpoint. Really take a step back from what they mean to you. And yeah, man, there's a lot of power in that. So, I mean, any other way other than like, did psilocybin really show you, what other way did it show you differently of who you were, other than like that event that happened in your relationship? Was there like a different dawning, a revelation that came from that?
I'm not sure that the biggest revelation is probably what we were talking about earlier with how we create the reality we want to create. This really is a choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. What I think is very difficult for a lot of us to do is to be vulnerable, to go on a podcast and say, hey, I had sexual trauma when I was younger.
Yeah.
I believe that that's something that a lot of us probably still struggle with, and I completely sympathize with it. I get it. It's not by any stretch of the means seem easy, but it's something that like we hold a lot more judgment and self-criticism and hardship over these things that we perceive in our own reality, that other people are just like, all right, whatever. Like, it doesn't really mean anything to me. You've built up this monster. You've built up this scary monster in your closet that you think is so bad and terrible, but then someone else sees it and they're just like, oh, like it's just a couple socks and the way you hung your shirt. Like, there's nothing that scary about it. And the key though is that we really can create the reality we want to create. The psilocybin helps to lower those walls of vulnerability. And it helps us allow to be vulnerable first and foremost with ourselves. I feel like a lot of people, depending on where you're at, it can be difficult for them to even be honest and vulnerable with themselves, because that's scary in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to lash out at the world and tell the world that they're wrong than actually look at the wounds and inner work that you've been hiding or running away from your entire life. And the psilocybin or psychedelics in general, they allow us to take a step back and to see the greater landscape of what's around us. The best analogy I've thought of so far is like if you're in a castle and your mind is that castle, you've kind of figured out where everything is, you know where to go for certain things. But what psychedelics do is kind of lift you up out of the walls of your own castle or even your own kingdom and show you the vastness of opportunity and adventure and options that you actually have available. It's not just this inside of your castle or your kingdom. It's far greater. You have so many more options. And this is something I'm even still trying to work on, which is seeing new opportunities or new paths in situations. So, I mean, I'm not perfect. I still get triggered by certain events. And by triggered, I mean that my nervous system gets activated. Yeah. So I very much have been trying in my daily practice to, when I feel that nervous system activation, look for more opportunities than what come to me right away. Because I know when I'm in that fight, flight, or freeze mentality, that my mind is on overdrive and you're actually cutting yourself off at the knees trying to look for options. So the best thing you can do is just come calm, be present in those situations, relax your body, relax your nervous system, and then make a decision from that space. And it's really difficult, man. But that, at least taking in that awareness or purpose of trying to have a different outcome, have a different experience, try to see the world in a different lens. And that's really what I've been trying to embody the most in my life, is trying at this point, like this is the current thing I'm doing, is just trying to see what new opportunities and new paths are available for me, given everything that I thought I've already known.
Amen, man. Good way to put it. And that's not even just from psychedelics. I think that's the whole spiritual gamut. If you want to sum it up pretty simply, it's that we work on ourselves so that when we do have certain events that happen that may trigger us, we decide how we react, not like letting our nervous system take over. And like you said, we fight, flight, or freeze. We have that split second discernment to be able to react that in a way that is beneficial, not only toward ourselves, but the whole world. And essentially that's the idea of creating good karma for the world, or not even creating karma, one could say, more sattvic actions, as one would say. That's the whole path, man. If you want to kind of sum it up, and it's being able to identify, become aware of what's going on, and then once you can do that, you just act a little bit better. And that even just comes in terms of like you said, reactions of, maybe stubbing our toe, or somebody says something weird about how you look or the shirt you're wearing, or like something that you said in the past. It's just like that split second reaction, and you don't respond in like this weird defensive, animalistic, competitive way. It's this way of not building inertia. And it depends on the circumstance. It depends on the person. It really is I'm generalizing, obviously, but it's very specific to whatever's going on in the person's life. But like I said, summing it up, it's just allowing us, I like the way you said, is explore our kingdom and explore the different aspects of the kingdom, which is essentially ourself. Become aware that there are different aspects of ourself, and then from there, it's like how we build the kingdom. And how we build the kingdom, translating that into our life, is like, what actions are we going to take in this life, not only in our personal life, but with others. And that's how we go about building the kingdom of heaven.
All
That's what it's
right.
all about, man. It's the actions that we take here, and that's the path. That's how I see it. It's just as important to meditate, go within, become aware, find the semblance of peace, as it is to act from that semblance of peace, act from that kingdom of heaven. And that's how we create, not only within, that's how we create it without. And yeah, I know we started off on psychedelics there, but that is the essence of psychedelics. I mean, more than just going into the trip and having this crazy exploration of the mind, it really is the dawning of a new perspective, maybe the conscious perspective. It's a dawning of a new light to see yourself in, and then from there, a new light to create out of. Not always, it's not a guarantee, but definitely it's a possibility for people to be able to tap into that with psilocybin or ayahuasca or whatever it is. Just don't become too attached to the experience. Just become acquainted with the lessons that it provides. And then I think from there, that's how you can have a healthy relationship with psychedelics. Yeah.
They'll kick you out whenever it's time.
Yeah, that's very true, man.
They're a lot
Yeah.
more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Yeah, man. They definitely got to have some kind of like their own spirit, their own intelligence for sure. You can feel that when you're under the influence. I don't even like saying under the influence because that sounds derogatory, but there is something when when you take this chemical induction of whatever it is, psilocybin, DMT, even LSD, whatever it is, there is this sense of like another. Like there's some kind of other that is like present. It's very strange. Maybe it is just our mind. I mean, we're just tapping into another aspect that we weren't able to tap into. But there is this. You can only, if you feel it, you can only feel it when you're in that mind state. That there is this like other life form. One may say, some people call it Mother Ayahuasca, other entities, God, whatever it is. This other like maybe even alien species. Some say that psilocybin and mushrooms are from, but there is this other almost a guidance in a way. And yeah, like you said, they will if they don't like or they're not needed, you're not needed by them, then it's not going to be a good experience. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. They're like aids. They're like, they're teachers in themselves in their own way. Plant spirits, man, for sure. Sounds like hippie talk, but if you know, you know. You gotta just do it yourself and take it yourself and you'll feel it. Yeah. But not saying anybody should take psychedelics. You gotta explore that in a healthy way, in a responsible way, in a legal way. The most important thing when you go about it, just do it safely.
For sure. Might not be for everyone, as much
It's
as I would
really
like to
not.
think it is.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah, I used to have that idea too when I first started to get into it. I'm like, maybe if everybody just started to take mushrooms tomorrow, then we'd have world peace. But it's not like that. It's special to the person. Yeah, I think you have to have a good foundation first, and it depends on the foundation that you lay for yourself that what it will provide. Yeah, they're like yogic aids. They're yogic assistants in a way. Maharaji, Maharaji, Ramdas's guru.
I know who Ramdas is.
Yeah, well, he had his guru named Maharaji. Long story, but he called them yogi medicine. So that's how I look at it. They're like yogi medicines. They help us along the path, but you don't need it. You don't need it for sure. They just can be as aids. And yeah, man, that's what it's all about, as aids for us to really bring it back here into this quote unquote real world, as the humanly world. Whatever way that you want to go about it, psychedelics, yoga, astral projection, hypnosis, whatever it is, man, whatever I think anybody has to do. And I'm not saying anybody has to do anything, but whatever you think, whatever you feel is right, like you said, man, whatever you feel is right on this path for you to be able to embody that loving spirit, then go with that. Go with your heart. That's another cliche. Listen to your heart, but it's true. And then once you can tap into your heart center, that heart center will provide that intuitive guidance for one to be able to live their life according to that sense of God that we talked about, that sense of that presence that will always be there. And then from there, that's how we reach that peace and happiness that we all yearn for. Yeah, man, go within. You don't have to go within. Just a suggestion, just a recommendation. Go within, find that little spark, that little glimmer of light, and then from there, shine the light. And that's what it's all about, man. We all have different ways to do it, but I think we all have it. We all got that light within ourselves. I do. Every single human being is even Hitler, man. He had some light. He just didn't access it, man. But I think every human being has a sense of light that we can embody here, and that's our job. And I think we're gonna get there, man. I think we're gonna be able to get there, but we'll see. It's all up to us, and who knows? We'll see what happens. I'm excited. I think it's a cool time to be alive. We have a lot of tools like psychedelics. We have a lot of practices like yoga, different meditative practices. Whatever it is, we all have our own flavor on this path. The spiritual path, as one may call it. But it's all the path to the same destination. And I know there's no destination. This is obviously just me speaking, just me putting on a show here for a podcast. There's no destination. There's nowhere we need to get to. But in a way, there is. If you can kind of analyze how I'm speaking and what I'm kind of getting at here, there is almost a destination, but the journey is the destination, man, like we said. So, yeah. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. Do you have any last words for any for any listeners?
Not that I can think of. It's just to create your own adventure, keep exploring, and check out my podcast.
Yeah, check out Clayton's podcast. What is it called again?
Traveling to Consciousness.
Traveling to Consciousness. I knew that. I apologize for forgetting.
It's all good.
Yeah, check it out. I will link it below. And yeah, keep exploring. Stay curious. Stay wondrous. Stay wondrous to the mystery of life, man. That's what I like to try and do. Every day I wake up, realize that I'm just caught in this mystery. I'm caught in this I don't even know. That's the thing. I don't even know. I can't even put a label on what we are in. But just stay curious and wondrous like a child. The Bible quote of how's it go? Something like those who do not become childlike will never be able to reach the kingdom of heaven. I try to keep that essence within me at all times, not being like immature childlike, but childlike in the sense of like pure wonder at the world, at just pure curiosity at the journey that I'm on. So if one can kind of resonate at that, to know that we are on a journey, and the journey is really kind of led by our curiosity, then that's when the fun starts. That's when the party gets started here in this humanly vessel. And yeah, man, I don't have anything else to say other than that. Hope everybody enjoyed. I thank you for your time, energy, your wisdom. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, man. Likewise, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to see where your podcast goes. Hopefully one person got some sort of wisdom out of this, because one's better than zero, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did, that's all.
Perfect.
That's that one person.
That validates the conversation. Yeah.
Exactly, man. But yeah, other than that, peace out. Namaste.